Hello and welcome to Politics Sphithiphithi, an eyewitness news podcast series that unpacks and makes sense of the nuances that defines the Sphithiphithi that is our politics. My name is Theto Mahlakoana and I'm with Carien Plessis.
On this episode, we sit down with former unionist and now businessman Frans Baleni as we discuss the makings of President Cyril Ramaphosa, the man who will tomorrow be sworn in as South Africa's 5th democratic president.
Dr. Baleni, welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
I think the most interesting question on anyone's mind is why we have you here in the context of Dr. Ramaphosa. How do you know him?
Look, Theto, I've known, we used to call him Plessis at the time, for a full 36 years. I was very young at the time, having joined the mining industry in 1979. He came to us around 1982 to form a union. So, take into account that he was not a mine worker.
Yes.
He was from Soweto, who were very suspicious. No, because we have been tricked before as mine workers. So yes, another tsotsi coming to us. But his approach, which was very strategic, he targeted those who were in senior positions, like clerks and all those things with Leonard. He targeted at the college. We used to have a mining training college. So there's a group of them, and it identified those who were very influential. That's how he ended up linking up with James Mutlatsi. And then the word started to spread, now coming from mine workers. And now we used to respect educated people at the time. Yes, a lawyer was going to rescue us. And then we just bonded.
Was it immediate?
Look, it took some time, but given the challenges of the time, because I had sort of involved in the student movement, joining the mining industry, you can imagine that the environment I found, and say, shouldn't we have something to assist us, you know, just to soften the brutality we were exposed to it. So when the union was formed in 1982, the word just spread. We were sort of volunteers, recruiters for the union, and in no time, especially in the gold mines, that became a nucleus of the NUM. In fact, the first skirmishes of strikes was around the gold mines.
And that's also where you picked up all your languages and where he picked up all his 11, 12 languages?
That's where I really picked up a number of African languages, including the language of Malawi. I was able to start to conversate in what we used to call it Nyasa. But I could not catch a vendor because we had no Chivenda speaking people in the mining industry. So I don't know why they chose not to be in the industry, but we know that they tend to be very good in maths and science. Maybe that's the reason they stay away from the mining industry.
Yeah, no, I was very impressed when the president campaigned in all the official languages. It was quite difficult to keep up with him. So, Ms. Baleni, when last did you speak to the president? You've known him for 36 years. Do you still speak?
We do. We do. He does call from time to time. I normally don't want to call him unless I want to send a message. And I do visit the family house. We normally have dinners and all those things. So it's more like a family member. But I normally don't abuse that. I give him his space. He's now the president of the country. What is also good about President Ramaphosa, he's a strategic thinker. He's a person who can put himself in the shoes of others. And I'm saying this, if you take the history, his space in the mining industry, he could have pursued his legal career. Today maybe could have been one of the judges or whatever. But he chose to contribute and uplift and change the environment of mine workers. The life was tough. It was bad, you know. Sometimes we'll be stripped naked when they do body search and health checks. We used to have armbands we had no names. And I still remember my company number, BC456089. It doesn't disappear. That change that today mine workers has pension fund and provident fund. Over and above that, death benefit. The industry used to kill not less than 1,000 workers a year. And once you were killed or you died, you go home. Some were actually buried around the mines, right? So today, the mining, the pension fund of mine workers started by President Ramaphosa is standing at over 30 billion rand. Today, mine workers has a death benefit. Yes, there's still more to be done. So if you take a person like that and put him now in charge of the nation, he's fully aware of the challenges facing the country, not only with the recent elections and campaigning, but he knows the extent of poverty. He knows the situation of our economy, what is to be changed and what is to be done. Given that strategic thinking, and added by being a visionary who wants to succeed, I found him now more also as a peacemaker. You know, when he was with NUM, when you went to his office, you had to think twice. What I'm going to present, is it right? Is the quality? And I hope Gwede Mantashe does not hear this. He went to present a report, quite excited about this good work which was done. And the next thing, Plessis had a red pen and said, "What is this?" All you know is nye, big mouth. He was almost in tears.
Even then.
He was almost in tears, you know.
Yes.
So that's the type. He said, "Don't bring problem. Let's discuss solution."
Theto Baleni, though, over the years, I think that kind of leadership style has sort of dissipated in him. What we see more of is the methodological leader, the person who takes his time, who wants to negotiate, around problems. And the criticism right now is that we don't need that kind of a leader, that we need that kind of strategic leader who has a red pen and says, this is corruption, scratch, you go now. Someone decisive in the moment. Do you think he's up to the challenge?
Look, he's up to the challenge. Obviously, he has to balance between the two. Politics is the art of the possible. With the outcome of Nazareth, you must bring along even the last resisting person. But there should be a cut-off point, which he has made a commitment to say, now time has come of stop talking. We must be delivering. He has said this and he has repeated this. I think it's possible that we will see him ensuring that there's implementation of resolutions of the ANC, but also taking the South Africans to his confidence, given that more than 10 million people voted for the ANC when it has a membership of less than a million.
But yeah, I'm just sometimes wondering, because we keep on saying that he will have to bring everybody in, but we see people like Esma Khashule saying, he's been saying things recently about we shouldn't sing songs to praise leaders. He said stuff about he's back on the radical economic transformation thing, and we know that that's kind of partly a factional rhetoric, white monopoly capital rhetoric. Yes. Do you think everybody is coming on board, and what will he do if they don't?
Look, I don't want to talk about individual leaders, but the point here is that people get into factions for their own interest. President Thabo Mbeki said at one stage, the ANC has been infiltrated by people with their own personal agendas. So you'll see a person fighting for a position right from the lower level of a branch, getting a chairperson because he wants to be either a councillor or he wants to be a mayor, and using that platform to enrich themselves. So once you know people driving faction, you must know that there's a particular agenda to satisfy their own selfish needs. And we are quite happy with the cleaning of the system. Your security cluster, the NPA, the justice system is on board. We will see those elements, those who have done wrong, one day are going to account. That we are confident. And so the system is going to make them to exit because they would have done either South Africa or someone wrong. I mean, the issue of the Vrede is so painful.
Yeah.
You know, I read the book and so on, that you speak a language when you say, I want to help the poor.
Yes.
And you do the opposite, and you are not shocked. If he was leading the province,
Yes.
Nobody is being taken to account to say, I was in charge, I deployed you to be responsible for that. Why is it normal? There's nothing wrong. People are here, they are there, they said, we have not benefited. But more than over 200 million is gone.
I think another pointer of just how his leadership will work towards cohesion of the movement, right, will be how he handles the alliance. That's been one of the biggest stumbling blocks, I think, in the realization of the kind of unity that the ANC aspires to. The kind of, I think it's a fallout of the alliance actually over the past 9 years. Is one of the things that went haywire. Do you think the president, in showing confidence, say, by the appointment of certain members of parliament who are more SACP aligned and COSATU aligned, that is an indicator that we'll see the alliance regrouping and indeed the inputs that are made in the alliance councils taken into consideration in government?
We're likely to see the alliance being strengthened. But it's subject to reconfiguration of the alliance. The president of the ANC must show leadership that this alliance is reconfigured. In that way, he will sustain the arrangements of an alliance. If the alliance is not reconfigured, I'm afraid in the next 5 years when we go to elections, we might be talking a different story. I hope the entire collective leadership of the ANC can have that message. He has committed himself in the reconfiguration of the alliance. This is the last notice. If that is not driving himself, we are likely to see the alliance collapsing.
Social cohesion. The president's spoken a lot about social cohesion. And I know you might not have, I don't know how closely you worked with him through the transition, through the negotiation of the constitution. But from what you've seen, do you think the president, do you think he has what it takes to create social cohesion? Because obviously social cohesion is also needed for economic growth. If you want to take the country forward, you need everybody on board. Do you think he has what it takes?
Look, I think, as I said, he's sort of also a peacemaker.
Yes.
He likes to bring everybody on board. But South Africa is a very complex country. I normally say it's like us watching Bafana Bafana playing. You've got all of a sudden 57 million coaches. So in South Africa, people have views, express themselves. While driving that social cohesion, things must happen. We can't be we're still consulting forever. At one point, decision must be taken, unfortunately, and then life must move on.
That is so true. I'm going to go back to the alliance just a little bit. And I'm going to go back because you were in the NUM in COSATU, and some of the most critical issues that were a problem then and which saw the resolution by COSATU last year, the Congress, to say that they want the SACP to make the decision on whether to contest or not so that they can make their own decision. It's mainly because there has been absolutely no adoption of policies agreed upon at the alliance level into government. And the COSATU then said it was because of individuals, right, who basically get overwhelmed by being ministers and by being in parliament and so on, and forget why they were sent there. Do you think that in this particular administration we'll see more reflection of those policies that are sponsored by the alliance? Say the NHI, for example, which has been stuck for the longest time and was sponsored by the alliance. Those are issues that need to be, I think, for the reconfiguration to be realized, to come to realization.
Well, it's going to be tested. COSATU did say, while supporting for the ANC is not a blank check. Same applies to the SACP. As you know, that there were people who felt very strong that the SAPC must contest power on its own ticket. So if the alliance partners are of the view that they are undermined and they are only used during the election time, I'm afraid, as I said earlier on, the alliance is going to collapse. But the president is very clear. He's aware of this risk. And, and he has taken upon himself to say, we want the ANC of Mandela, we want the ANC of Chris Hani, of Oliver Tambo, the ANC which knew that the alliance is the center. The alliance must always drive policies and all those things, you know. So if he missed that, I'm afraid there will be serious challenges. The reconfiguration of the alliance must suggest to an extent that there's input from a policy formulation. Those who are deployed coming from a background of the alliance, do they account to the different parties? For example, why a person like Tulas Nlesi coming from the SACP cannot ensure that elements of SACP policies are implemented? I've seen a system in Sweden where you are coming from a particular party but forming sort of a labor-related coalition, right? But you're still accountable to the union where you're coming from. While you're a parliamentarian, you are a member of a union. So you go and report to your union and all those things. And I think it's something which in the configuration of the alliance can be considered and it can work.
And yeah, and we have seen, I remember in 2009 when then President Zuma, when he appointed some unionists into the cabinet, it was kind of a first. There were more unionists in the cabinet than before. And I'm just wondering, we're looking at a possible cut down, the cabinet being cut down, the ministerial positions. Do you think there would be space to do that again, to appoint union leaders into cabinet?
Obviously, we all support the idea of cutting down the cabinet. For me, what's important that this appointment must never be about patronage. What we have witnessed in the past, it was more about patronage. It was not a sincere appointment. People were basically used and people were being neutralized. They only discovered down the lane when they started to confess to say we have been used. So people must be appointed based on merits, right? Obviously that spread in terms of alliance component, in terms of gender, race, geographical spread. Those are the things age-wise must be taken into account. Not just you are appointing me for the sake that I come from the unions and therefore you are neutralizing COSATU not to have a big mouth, they've got somebody inside. It won't work.
And the economy, I think that's the biggest headache we all have, isn't it? We have not only a political crisis, but we have an economic crisis, I think, which is more pressing because this affects everyday life. The cost of living for everyone has pretty much skyrocketed. How does the president make sure that that is centered in the reduction of the cabinet size? Can we reduce the cabinet and still make sure that we have that as the core, pursuit of stabilizing the economy?
Look, for us to move to the next level, there has to be an injection in the economy. Now, I spent some time in the ESCOM task team.
Yes.
And I got so worried when South Africans has not discovered what I have discovered and the team, that this thing is about to collapse. And you can imagine if it collapsed. So if you have people who are still making noise around this ship which is collapsing, instead of all of us being aware that the ship is sinking and therefore how do we save the ship? Let's take, if we can continue this trajectory, can you imagine the 16 or 17 million people who are drawing from the fiscus in terms of grants, right? Now, if we don't have increased the contributors, it means that system can collapse to a point where the economy of our country cannot afford to pay grants. What would happen in this country? When people are just panicking for not knowing that I'm going to be paid on day one or day two, it's a crisis. Now, it will be a severe crisis if people can be aware that you are not going to get your money because there's no money. So that's how serious is the problem. So we need to ensure that we grow the economy. The steps which he has taken are at the right direction. For example, mobilizing 100 billion. I've been exposed as we're doing ESCOM work, how commercial banks and investors and also are quite keen to contribute. He has an advantage in that his leadership style, his background in terms of business person and as a leader, that a number of people have volunteered to say, we are behind you. We can support you. I can count not more than 10 people who happen to be white, who have never voted for the ANC and said, we're going to vote for Cyril because we think that he's a steward who can take care of this country and save us out of the mess which we allowed ourselves to be in the past few years.
Yeah. Now, the economy, I mean, and mining, do you think his background in mining can help rescue the mining business in South Africa? Because, mining just doesn't seem to be doing well.
They say it's a sunset industry.
Yeah. Look. And do we need to rescue mining? I mean, what is it that we need to do, or that he needs to do to make the economy work otherwise?
I'm conflicted because there's a saying that said love is blind. So I still believe strongly that mining can be a sunrise industry or is still a sunrise industry. Who had glitches around policy in the era of the former minister of DMR with
the
mining charter, with Gwede Mantashe coming in, who has a background coming from mining space, highly respected by the industry. He has injected positiveness, right? And we think that even if there are some bit of challenges, it's normal that should be allowed. There's do-nathering between the regulator and the producers. And we think that with that policy behind it, I've seen positiveness where Anglo, for example, has come on board. We're injecting X billions of rand. De Beers has come on board. You can see, because mining a future is informed by development. If there's no exploration, it means you're not building pipeline.
Yes.
So how I assess the future of mining is the number of explorations to happen. If you look at what Musebenzi Zwane did, was that you must have a BE from an exploration point of view. Now, Father Christmas, which BE will have the money?
Yeah.
Because to do exploration is based on the reserve you have, the accumulated profit you have made over a period of time. Then you can drill and say, there's a sample. Once you have got that, you can then bring parties and say, let's have a joint venture. So I'm still positive. While there will be like a couple of layoffs, there's that bit instability, but the future does suggest that you cannot ignore mining.
I'm just going to go on that point as well. And I like that you mentioned that you were on the task team, because that is quite useful for this question. Because, you know, the producers warned that should, for example, the tariff be hiked, there would be mass job losses in mining, right? And we also know that even how mining is conducted needs to change, because we can no longer send people down there. We need to invest in deep level mining, which is more tech based. So should we be having a conversation that begins with ESCOM and comes to the miners and comes to the workers, and where should that conversation be happening? How would a president like Cyril Ramaphosa approach such a conversation?
To fund an entity like ESCOM, you've got few options. One is money they have, or ability to borrow. Two, the shareholder comes to the party and hoy money.
And the shareholder in this case does not have the money.
And the shareholder is the government, does not have money.
Yeah.
The third one is tariffs, right? So there's no way that you can avoid tapping in all these three to save ESCOM. Because if the shareholder alone gives 250 or 300 billion to ESCOM, it means me and you, the taxes must go up and all those things, and the economy will go south. So that's not an ideal. So they can contribute what they have, which is the limited amount, I think it's about 600 and so billion over a 3-year period. then the capacity of Eskom to raise money, at this stage, if I were to whisper to you in a room, I would say technically it's bankrupt, right? So it needs to be safe so that it has capacity to raise funds, but you cannot strangle a company in terms of debt, like Emachonisa, you know, because it means that they can't do anything except to service debt, right? Then, unfortunately, you have this tariff increase, which was avoidable. There was just no way. We have now to deal with the consequences thereof, which means that the mines have indicated that they're going to be laying off. I would have expected that labor, the employers, including other stakeholders, to say, what do we do? Because we can't avoid it. So let's look at other measures which can mitigate against retrenchment and all those things. For example, venturing in agriculture, providing seed capital for ex-mine workers in a space of land, exploitation and agriculture, or other means, rather than they say, we're just laying off, there's nothing we can do, or we're making noise about the high tariffs. It's unavoidable.
Yes. The other question that I think links closely to that is your wish list for a minister of labor, for instance, right? And I'm not putting your head on the block here.
Okay.
I'm going to substantiate why I say so. Because you mentioned that ideally you should have a solution that gives workers who are laid off an option to say, go farm. We have a fund, the training layoff scheme, that injects in 2 billion rand every year, which has been there since 2008. No one is touching that money. We need a minister who's going to know what to do with that money.
I agree with you. I just hope that President Ramaphosa would do away with what we have experienced in the past. Where you have a minister of the ANC coming in, do as he or she wishes, notwithstanding the policies of a movement. The Minister of Communication once did it. What do you call it?
With the digital...
Yes.
The migration.
So if they are to follow the policies of the ANC, there must be consistency. It doesn't matter who you are. Coming in there, we know that there's a crisis of unemployment. We know that the crisis of retrenchment. You'll even look at the UIF. It sits with billions of rands, right? They even at one stage were contemplating to ask employers to have a holiday, not to contribute. That's the extent of the money. Why can't you use that money to actually come up with schemes in providing even before people are laid off or post retrenchment? So you need a minister who will really be running the policies of implementing the policies of the ANC, but taking into account the needs of the country and not be a trade union desk operator or employer operator. Those things must be done according to the policies of the movement.
Do you have a name in mind?
No. You made a promise.
We're running out of time, so please.
We're running out, yeah. My question, I want to bring it back to politics, to Parliament. We've seen the last Parliament erupt in, past year, since 2014, been erupting in red flames, so to speak. How do you think, what qualities do you think President Ramaphosa has to deal with a disruptive, possibly also necessary force like the EFF in Parliament? What skills have you seen him have to deal with people like that and to get them to observe some debate at least?
Look, I think he was sort of taken aback because he normally operates within the House rules. And the new party which came in the last election sort of started to operate outside the House rules and therefore created an abnormal situation. With the president of the time, they were sort of feeding in that system. We think that there's going to be stability, but people, because they want mileage in politics, anarchists becoming a tool for politics. But I think he was going to navigate through that and manage that, because when you deal with facts, service political parties, even opposition, give them space, interact with them, understand where they're coming from, he can do that. He's capable of doing that.
And that's a wrap. Thank you so much for joining us. That feels like it was just one question, eh?
Yeah.
It was very short. Thank you for joining us.
It was too long.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Politics Sphithiphithi. We hope to catch you the next time.